poopy. Poopy.
Poopy.
Especially because we had this great conversation, like a half-hour long conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
About like the craziest shit, and it's all lost. It was all for naught.
All everything from South Korean cinema to being Canadian to Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky, yeah. What are you doing in here, Noam Chomsky?
It's not a conversation until Noam Chomsky shows up.
Hey, you know what they say? To know him is to love him.
Oh no.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Welcome back to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch terrible movies and then pitch them back to each other because nobody pays us enough money and they should give us more money. No, we do it because we love it. And my name is Janglez Lestrange, and I'm joined by my very good friend Nate Draper.
Hello. Yes, I think the first time we did it, you said, because nobody will give us any fucking money.
Yeah, nobody will give us, I don't know. But like I said, at that time, it was really, really aggressive. I was really aggressive that time.
But it came from the heart.
It came from the heart. But ever since my computer crashed, maybe I'm just being a little bit more sensitive. Like maybe my computer was mad at me for yelling at it. Like, give me some fucking money, you stupid computer. But here we are. And today we are talking about the 2005 quote-unquote classic. Super sarcastic on classic. War of the Worlds by Steven Spielberg.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had texted you or Skyped you, I had said, gee, thanks, I hate it. And that is because, as I said before, that is because I hate horror movies. I hate horror movies. I have seen precisely 2 horror movies in my life, if you want to count them either as horror movies, and that's Alien, which is the scariest movie I've ever seen, and then Jaws, which I don't know if people still count as a horror movie anymore.
Yeah, I think it technically, if you want to get into genre, what classifications, I think it's technically a thriller, but I think it's technically a thriller, but yeah.
In the expanded universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you chose War of the Worlds, which, by the way, I will say, the reason I hated it was because it's a horror movie, not because it was a bad movie. We'll get into why I think it's a bad movie, but that's a separate issue from the fact that I don't like horror. I just want to be clear about that. But you chose this movie, so I wanted to ask why. Why did you pick War of the Worlds?
Yeah, so I saw it when it came out in 2005, and I was about 13 at the time, and I loved it. I thought it was an amazing movie. Now, mind you, at that time in my life, I loved anything that had giant aliens in it. And that includes Transformers, which we have also done on this show.
Yeah.
And, the
Michael Bay Transformers, not the
1980s one with Orson Welles.
Because that show's awesome.
The actual Michael Bay Transformers that we just recently rewatched, recently being 2 or 3 months ago.
January.
And concluded it is not a great movie.
No.
However, this is the first time I've seen War of the Worlds since 2005 when it first came out. And I got to say, I actually still enjoyed watching it. Because the reason I was so curious about revisiting it was because the time in between when I'd last seen it, if ever it came up in conversation, people would always say, "Oh yeah, that movie was what a letdown that movie was." And I always, in my memory, went, I really remembered enjoying that movie." I think it was just because of the aliens. However, I do think there are a lot of things working for this movie, which I can get into. But I do think,
yes,
well, okay, I will get into those then. So for starters, I still think the effects are great. I still think the design of the alien, the giant tripod, is amazing. The other thing too is I'll also add that I have read the book since having seen the movie.
Did you watch the movie before you read the book though?
So actually, when I had actually read an abridged version of the book, but not like the full novel.
Yeah.
So but the thing is, I hadn't realized that I had read an abridged version. I just thought I'd read the book, and then later went, oh, that wasn't the full book. That was like a basically it was modified for preteens, basically version of War of the Worlds that I had read. So, but I was familiar.
At least it wasn't the HBO version, because then they would have just had like lots more death and lots more boobies.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, I mean, if that's your thing, go for it. But like, they also probably would have had alien sex.
Oh yeah, that'd be a very interesting.
That'd be an interesting adaptation. HBO, call me.
Give me some fucking money.
Give me some fucking money, HBO.
So this H.G. Wells version, I've read that since 2005.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've been wanting to revisit it for a while, and even though I've just seen it again for the second time, I'll admit it's not fantastic. There are some problems with it, but I actually still enjoyed it. I actually still thought it was a pretty decent...
Yeah.
I would say overall, I had an enjoyable experience watching the movie, I would say. I found it immersive.
Yeah. Immersive is the right word, because I definitely was involved in the movie. I felt for the characters, particularly Rachel. I was invested in her as a character more so than any of the others. I don't know. I'm torn. I liked the movie, or I enjoyed watching the movie, but I don't know that I thought it was good, but I was definitely invested. I don't know. It wasn't like the case where I was with Downsizing, where I watched Downsizing, and I still to this day, I'm like, I don't know if I liked that movie. I don't know if I like that movie. All I know is the more I talk about it, the more I think I like that movie.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas this one, the more I think about it, the more I think I won't like it. I still don't like it, and I don't like horror in general, but that isn't to say that horror is a bad genre. There are things about this that definitely work for me, and then there are things about this that I think definitely don't work. And but I will say that, like, I did, again, have fun watching it is the wrong word, because it's horror. So does anyone have fun watching horror? No. But I think I was suitably scared, or at least upset in the way that I should have been, which means the movie did its job, which is a good thing.
Right. The way it was meant to manipulate your emotions, it succeeded in doing that.
Yeah, which I think is a good thing. Like there were times where I felt scared, there were times where I felt grossed out or angry, and then there were times where I felt angry for the wrong reasons, because parts of this movie are bad. So, but overall, not the worst movie I've ever seen, and probably not the worst, definitely not the worst we've ever done on CineMasters, but probably not the worst movie that we've done in a while, even. Yeah,
definitely. The one last thing I was going to add two last things that I was going to add that I thought were really great. That sound, that low,
gives me shivers. I can't even.
So cool.
Whenever I do it, I just wind up sounding like I'm trying to intimidate the Inception soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like a whale. I don't even know.
Like a dinosaur that's dying.
Yeah.
And I do think Steven Spielberg's direction. We talked about this before on the show because we did Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
But even in the movies, in his quote unquote bad movies, his ability to stage scenes still shines through, and this is no exception.
Yeah.
And I think specifically the one moment, there was one shot, and I think we both talked about this shot was the one where he walks up from the basement, and he's standing there and he's looking at something, but you don't see what he's looking at. There's a little bit of wind, and it slowly pulls back as he walks through the space. The camera pulls back, and it reveals this plane has crashed into the house,
into the house, into the neighborhood, into the house. Really. Yeah.
And the whole neighborhood is destroyed. But it's done in the way the camera is basically motivated by Tom Cruise's movements through the space. And then it slowly pulls back, and as he sees more, we see more, but we see it with him.
Yeah.
Without any cutting, it's quite a remarkable.
Yeah.
This is to me what would separate, other things as well. But I was going to say what separates him from Michael Bay. He also gets better performances than Michael Bay. But he is. But as a filmmaker, it's.
I think I do. I will say
we all agree.
In this movie's favor, I will say that the cinematography that you're talking about, like the shots, the scenes that are set, are different from other movies because they're often of destruction or chaos. Mm-hmm. And I think often what Spielberg does well is like set a scene of like, usually that's like awe or wonder. We talked about this in Temple of Doom episode. Like the way that you set a film by giving information versus not giving information. Like if you want to get essentialize, it's like Spielberg versus Hitchcock, whereas Hitchcock shows you or sets tension up by giving you a bit of information by the way it's shot. Spielberg gives you all the information, and somehow that's still just as terrifying or tension building. I do think that in most cases, because often when I think of Spielberg, I immediately go to Jurassic Park, the first one, because it's one of my favorite movies. And the way he shoots the dinosaurs is often showing them fully, which is weird because in a horror movie you don't usually do that, but everybody knows that the draw for dinosaur movies is to see the dinosaurs. So you show the dinosaurs, and they're terrifying. They're still terrifying. But then when it comes to a movie like this, which is very different from Jurassic Park, instead we get big landscape shots or sprawling shots of the tripods or of the destruction, and yet it's still terrifying because we're seeing what is left behind. We're not even, a lot of the time, we're not even actually seeing the tripods. We just see what they do. We do see a lot of the tripods, but like the plane crashing is about the EMP, right? We don't even see the plane crash. We literally see they close the door on their shelter, and then the next morning they open and everything's just destroyed. We didn't see the actual event, and somehow that's more terrifying because we see the vastness of the neighborhood just demolished by this plane crash. Although I will say there were a lot of not bodies.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, there was a distinct lack of bodies.
They all left.
Yeah, I think it's because as far as horror movies go, this movie is still PG.
It's very PG.
It's spooky, and I mean, we talk about the ending. We both hate that ending.
Specifically, the cheese, the
family reunion.
Oh, we're all together. We're all alive.
Yeah,
somehow,
which was dumb, and I hated it. But like, not the ending, because I didn't know this because I purposely wrote my pitch without reading the synopsis or anything about War of the Worlds. I just wanted to write my pitch based on the movie we got. So later on, after I wrote my pitch, I read that the them dying of bacteria is actually in the book, and it kind of works. I just think the reason it doesn't work in this is because the crux of the movie is based around sort of two opposing ideas between, is this in fact a story about people surviving 9/11 as an allegory, or is this War of the Worlds? And if it's people surviving 9/11 as an allegory, then it doesn't matter really how the creatures die at all. In fact, I think it's a cop-out when you look at it that way, but when you look at War of the Worlds, that's what happened. That makes sense, and that's what happened in the book because it's telling a different story. Because I do think that this is really the reason that Ray is, and his children, and Ray is not a good character, and his children kind of suck, and the way they all interact with each other, and all the characters that get introduced at the beginning, all of that is really to say that this is about people surviving catastrophe. And that's why I think the ending is uplifting, because it's all like, we can overcome this. And I think it literally sets itself, and very, very obtusely sets itself as a 9/11 allegory.
Yeah. Which is why I think it could have been, and in the last time when we talked about it before, I did say how I felt like there was more to this movie, and I still feel that way. I do think there is another layer to it.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why for me it doesn't land is ultimately because of the characters. I really think the character, and I don't mean the acting, I actually think the acting is very good. They're all good actors. I just think and I don't even mean the dialogue, I just mean the choices for who the characters are and the choices that they make. I just found, specifically in the first 10 minutes of the movie, that to me I just found that all very questionable.
Yeah, there's too many characters. They all interact in a weird way. It feels like we're just like picking up archetypes to tell the story. Instead of like really going into depth, like, oh, broken family, kids don't get along, rebellious teen, problem, like, and it's never really explicitly said, but Rachel has like claustrophobia. I think it is explicitly said, actually, but that's sort of brushed over. It's like, because she's like freaks out at weird points and does weird things, and I was like, is she supposed to be like on the spectrum or just claustrophobic? And by on the spectrum, I mean, like,
again,
is she
it's
ASD?
vague enough that it's also, it maybe would have worked more if it was tied. It did somehow feel like it wasn't quite tied into the story in a way where it fit. It was just like they needed to find a way to make it so that she was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But they could have done that
in more subtle ways.
Just the fact alone,
or just commit to the claustrophobia
invasion, and that would make anybody anxious.
Yeah, or just commit to the claustrophobia. Like, it's fine if you want to do the claustrophobia, but like commit to it then. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, let's make this about or make that she has claustrophobia, and that's just another layer to the story, and that that can work fine. Mm-hmm. I do. There is one scene at the beginning that I think, I was just thinking about it. You know when Rachel gets a sliver, and she says, "No, I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it." And her dad's like, "Let me see it. Let me see it." "No, I'm just going to leave it. My body will push it out on its own." That's what I read. I think that's somehow supposed to be very shitty, but it's somehow supposed to be like a foreshadowing of how the Martians or aliens, they're Martians in H.G. Wells, are like pushed out by the human or the Earth organism as like an entire being, the Earth.
Right.
I don't know what you want to call that. Culture?
Bacteria?
But it's like, I mean, all of the Earth. Like, bacteria is a part of the Earth. Like, in the end of the movie, it literally says, like, you know, man gets to live because of a million deaths, right? That came before it, because we've adapted. And we, you know, so I think that was supposed, I think that's what that line is supposed to be.
Yeah, it's quite possibly. But I think you're right, actually.
But it's kind of bad. It's bad. Like the fact that we have to like debate its validity as a allegory or as a foreshadowing of that concept already says that it wasn't clear enough.
Yeah, well, it's also, I think it also, it does seem contradictory, because she's a character who has some sort of anxiety, and like what maybe, I'm just throwing this out there, maybe it would have worked better if she was freaking out that she had the sliver, and then we'd see that, oh, she's someone who she gets triggered very easily.
Yeah.
She's very sensitive to external stimuli, let's say. So then now that she's in this even more trying situation, it's even more difficult for her.
Yeah.
That may be, but yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, it's there for foreshadowing, but
like foreshadowing, like the body is supposed to be like Earth.
Yeah.
But then
I guess,
yeah, again, it's like that's
reading into
flimsy.
it too much.
Yeah, that's flimsy at best. And I'm sure you could make an argument for it, but like I wouldn't, like if this was a grade 10 like essay, I wouldn't hang your whole thesis on that, bud.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Going back to sorry. I was going to say, so since we're talking about it now, some of the pitfalls with the film, I think really have to come down to, again, not the acting. I think they're all exceptional actors. Like, I think Tom Cruise is an amazing actor, really.
Yeah.
I know some people give him a lot of flack, but I think have you seen Edge of Tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually based off of a manga called Live, Die, Repeat. And it's really good. It's really good.
I actually haven't read it, but the reason I bring that up is because there's this one moment in the movie where she basically, it's towards the end of the movie.
Emily Blunt's character, you mean?
Yeah. Emily Blunt's character. I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil this for anybody who hasn't seen the movie.
Plug your ears.
He's basically lived a day with her, like over and over and over again, and he's gotten to know her really well. And she says this line where she says, "I really wish I got to know you better." And I remember watching his reaction, and it's all on his face, and him trying to find the words to express how he feels. Like, I know you so well. And he doesn't say anything, but it's all in his face. And that was a moment for me where I went like, okay, yeah, this guy can act.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I like Tom Cruise. I think Tom Cruise is in some of my favorite films are, I mean, we constantly bring this movie up. I guess we should get around to it eventually, but The Last Samurai is one of my favorite movies.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he actually acts amazing in that movie, and I think the transformation you see in his character is really believable. I just think that movie is problematic. And one day we're going to do it.
Okay, I would like to. I think
Yeah.
I definitely think we should do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and well, I mean, obviously, I mean, the one that I think is his best performance is Magnolia. But all
I
that aside,
I definitely haven't seen Magnolia.
oh, you have to see Magnolia.
Okay.
You have time now. It's long. Paul Thomas Anderson admits that.
Wait. Isn't that like the 5-hour movie?
It feels like a 5-hour movie. It's only like a 3.5-hour movie.
Okay.
It's way too long. Paul Thomas Anderson admits it's way too long. But it is a great movie.
Okay, maybe I'll treat it like a TV show and just watch it in like half-hour implements.
You probably could. You probably could do that. I do think it's quite an ambitious movie. I love it. I think it's a great movie. It's just almost too big to package.
Yeah.
If there's any criticism for it. But the thing is, like, everything about it is done so well.
So it's not like the Titanic where you watch the Titanic is a long movie, but you already know how it ends.
Yeah, exactly. No, the thing is Magnolia, like right in the first 15 minutes, you know, I have no idea where this is going to go.
Oh, okay.
It's basically the first 15 minutes is basically a series of short films about coincidence.
Oh, okay.
It's a very bizarre movie. It's a very art house movie.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. It's Paul Thomas Anderson.
Okay.
If you haven't figured it out, I love Paul Thomas Anderson.
Okay. But
Anyway, back to War of the Worlds.
Worlds.
The acting, it's not a problem with the acting. It just has to deal specifically with how they set up the character, and specifically, I just didn't buy what parent forgets that even if they're a bad parent, what parent forgets their kid has a peanut allergy
or is claustrophobic? What parent doesn't know that?
Exactly. So at the beginning, we're seeing he's trying to repair whatever broken relationship he has with his kids. That's evident. But at the same time, he is I'm baffled as to how useless he is as a parent. So that's where I feel like it sets itself up for failure right at the beginning, because there's two massive, and it's like, yeah, you want to have a character who has contradictions, but I just didn't buy it. I did not buy that this guy was he's supposed to be self-serving and also a good parent.
Or at least trying to be a good parent.
Or at least trying to be a good parent. But the thing is, like, the one scene where she's like, what are we going to eat? And he's like, I don't know, order something. And you're like,
do you not have food in your fucking house? Like, what are you eating?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, what? Well, like, you seemed like you really wanted to make it work with your kids, and now you're just, wait, you forgot to feed them?
Also, who the fuck doesn't like hummus?
That's also a very good point.
Like, I don't know. Monsters. It's just garlic and chickpeas, and sometimes other flavors like chipotle. Like, garlic is amazing. Chickpeas don't taste like anything. And like, if it's got chipotle in it, like, you're fucking cruising there, bud. Like, who doesn't? Yeah. That pissed me off. Like, what is this? It's called like hummus. Whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I agree.
What I think about this reason that what you're bringing up is that, and you had said it before we started, that you're not sure. I mean, you can make movies where you don't have to like the main character,
right?
But the movie should be telling you that. And so what we get is, and what I think you're saying is that the movie is saying you should like this character. That's what the movie wants you to do. But all of the actions that the character is doing are to the contrary. Mm-hmm. And I want to have a flawed character, and I'm fine with having a flawed character. But at the beginning, the introduction of all these things that are happening basically say, like, oh, isn't this character like sympathetic? He's trying to make it through to his kids. And that's what the movie, I guess, is trying to tell me. But the entire time I'm just going, no. He's an asshole. I don't care. Mm-hmm. And for me, the only character that really hit home in terms of somebody I made a connection with was Rachel. That's Dakota Fanning's character. Because I felt like the older brother, Robbie, was just a stereotype.
Yeah, I agree.
And I felt like Tom Cruise's character himself was just a stereotype. He's a stand-in for an everyday kind of guy in an everyday family, in an everyday neighborhood, so that we can tell a story that is ostensibly about how people react under these kinds of circumstances, a la 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is, if you're going to make a movie, even if it's about that, I think right off the bat, if you have generic, like, let's say you're trying to do like an everyday sort of character, that's in and of itself a problem, because I actually believe that you have to make something more specific in order to make it more general.
More general, yeah. And I think that's what they were going for when they were like, oh, we'll tell it from this family's perspective and root it in characters.
I think so.
But
in terms of just having a film that, like, you want your audience to, they don't have to like the character, but I think they have to really connect with the journey that they go on.
Yeah.
And in this case, I feel like where
it took me a long time to
work.
get to that point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thread that needed to really be thread was the how this journey of I'm trying to survive an alien invasion is going to help me repair the relationship with my family. Those were the threads that really needed to be connected, I think, in order to have made this work.
Yeah, because I really didn't feel like I was invested in the characters, and probably until we hit the point where they were driving and people started attacking the van.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree, because I thought there were some I thought that was a really good sequence.
Well, then it was finally like we finally see, like, before then it's sort of Ray is constantly fighting with his kids, like he's trying to do the best for them, but he's fighting. But when we get that point, we see like Ray is willing to put shit on the line. Like, he's willing to pull a gun out, and he's willing to be like, and the guy with the other gun, and he's just like, I just want my daughter. And I was like, there it is. That's what's been missing is. And that actually worked, because I feel like I wish that had come sooner, because if we see Ray sort of be a jerk and then immediately have this scene where we're like, oh no, he might be a jerk to his children, but like they're still his children. That's flawed. That's character. That's real. That was the first time I felt like Ray, Tom Cruise's character, was real. And I never felt like
the same way.
I never felt like Robbie was real. Ever.
No, I agree. I found him just a weird character.
Yeah. I actually had a really cool thing that I do with him in my pitch, which I'm very excited for.
Okay, cool. I have a really cool thing that I did with him too, which was
awesome.
just, you could probably guess.
Yeah,
he's just not in there.
Yeah, but
I'm like, what is he there for?
I think he is there for a purpose, and I'm going to talk about that. But I just want to go over some of the stuff that I thought was bad, and then some of the stuff that I thought was good, and then I want to hear your pitch.
Okay.
The best part of this movie was the SpongeBob bit. I just like SpongeBob. The scene, this is weird. The scene, and I spoke about it before, but I think it's weird. The scene where they're like standing outside in the backyard, and they're like, "That's weird. The wind is flowing towards the storm. Why is there so much laundry outside?" like from a filmmaking standpoint, I get that it's like an indicator, like it's easy to follow with your eye, but also like, who hangs that much fucking laundry? So much laundry.
Spielberg does, clearly.
Spielberg does, yeah.
Actually, if you've seen Color Purple, there's like laundry hanging everywhere. Of course, that was a time when to dry laundry, they didn't have dryers.
Yeah, but I mean, I still dry laundry outside, but like, I don't know, it just seemed like there was a lot of laundry out there. The aliens coming outside of the ship, I thought was actually kind of dumb. I love the tripods, and I said, like, I like that the aliens, when they come out of the ship, are tripedal.
Yeah.
Like, so that the ships were designed by the way, like the same way that the aliens walk. But I was like, I don't think they should come out of the ship. I don't think we need that. Because I think that scene at the end where like all the liquid comes out and we see the alien slide down as it's dying. That should have been like the one and only reveal if you were going to have any.
I think so too. Yes, I think so too.
Yeah. But I also think
then suddenly you see how vulnerable it is at the very end.
At the very end. I also think that the aliens looked a little too humanoid.
Yes,
like in the
actually,
face.
The way they're described in the book is more like octopus-like.
Yeah, I think that would make more sense. I like that they were tripedal. That was cool. But I think, they should have been way less human looking.
Yeah. I pictured something very different.
Yeah,
but again, it's their interpretation.
The ending was shit. The fact that Robbie is still alive is shit. Yeah, and I will say that I did feel like this movie was like a TV show. It was like The Walking Dead, because I felt like, because they're on a journey, every point that they get to in the story just feels like its own story. Like it's just like,
right.
Oh, we're at the farmhouse now, and then we're in Boston now, and then we're at the ferry now, and all of these are sort of loosely connected. And I think it would work better as a TV show if we did each one of those as an episode, exploring like human nature. Whereas, in The Walking Dead, the zombies are this scary thing, and in this it's the aliens, but both of them are really an exploration of how people are scary. Like the real horror comes from how people interact, not the aliens so much, although they're still really scary. But I think it works better in The Walking Dead because The Walking Dead, the zombies are a literal like horror of death. They are literally the horror of death. They are what you become when you die, and so, you know, we deal with how people are scary, but we're always afraid and running away from zombies, which is running away from death. Yeah. So I think that this is like almost a predecessor to The Walking Dead. Now for the goods, the things that I thought were really good. I also just want to mention the sound design for the tripods. That, I mean, we already spoke about that, but it's so good. There's the scene where Rachel is looking at the river, and then all of a sudden the dead bodies slow down.
The music.
Yeah, and it was scary, but it was so well done. So good. The set pieces were big, but not too big, so they still felt realistic. Like, I never felt like I was watching a Michael Bay movie. I felt like I was watching something that could happen, like people on a ferry, or, I don't know, it didn't feel like we were watching train, like, wheels get thrown off of a truck on a highway. I'm looking at you, Michael Bay. And then the last thing I want to talk about that was both good but I hated was the Bloodweed. I found that really like horrifying as a concept and like chilling,
right,
in terms of horror, which I hated, but I also thought was like really good. Like the fact that the Bloodweed is like they like harvest humans to like spray on the weed so they can like,
use as fertilizer.
Use as fertilizer so they can eat the weed or whatever. It's never really explained, but I was like, that is terrifying. Like just spraying blood on this bloodweed. Ugh, yucky, no thank you.
There's something very visceral about it.
Yeah, something like the body horror, the physical horror, visceral horror is disgusting about that. I wish it had explained more, like they were harvesting the weed. Like they never explicitly say that, so I wonder what the weed is for. But whatever.
I mean, exactly.
So I want to hear your pitch.
Cool. There was another thing I was thinking of just as you were talking, and then I'll get into my pitch. I noticed Janusz Kaminski, he was the director of photography. There was a period in his movies where he really liked to blow out his highlights. At the time,
you're going to have to dumb that down for me. I don't know what that means. I have an idea of what it means.
There's this sort of this like blue, like this, the highlights. So like the whites have this sort of like a glow to them. So you see it in the Minority Report, and you see it in this, especially. Like whenever there's a lot of harsh light, it's got this sort of bloom,
like a super bloom.
Yeah. I don't know. I want to know why he did that, because I'm just looking at it now. Maybe it was just because it just looks weird to me.
It's funny because like when you talk about blowing out the highlights, all I can think of is the graphics for Twilight Princess, or there was a mode on Ratchet and Clank where it was called Super Bloom, where like all the lights were like extra bright and shit.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that, actually.
I do know what you're talking about, like where the blues are like super blue and the whites are like extra white, like glowy.
They have this like glowy, yeah. But it's like he did that in this and in Minority Report, and I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not necessarily saying it's bad, but
well, maybe the idea is to give it more of a sci-fi look, like the lights look a little bit more oppressive and omnipresent.
I have no idea, but it does. It's something that I noticed. Like when I was watching it, I latched onto right away and was like, why did he do that? Why it's so? But it just looked weird to me. And I did the same thing whenever Minority Report comes on. If I'm somewhere and it's on the TV, that's the first thing I notice. I'm like, why did he do that with the highlights? It's so weird.
But I think it seems to work because you noticed and you're talking about it. So maybe it just gives it a more iconic look. Again, maybe it's a sci-fi thing.
Maybe. I don't know. It's also a taste thing. I don't know. I just find it's too much for me. It's not subtle.
You'd prefer everything in sepia tone.
I mean, who am I to complain? He's only won 2 Oscars, whatever.
You prefer things in sepia tone.
I think I do, actually.
Oh, I was just joking, but whatever.
I don't like blowing out my highlights. Let's say that. Yeah. I don't know if he does. I don't know.
Whatever.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Hit me with your pitch.
Okay, so I tried to stick with the Americanized War of the Worlds because, the temptation is always to go, just make the book. But I tried to stick with the War of the Worlds Americanized version, 2005. Mine's a period piece. Remember, now we're in 2020, so it's a 2005
15
period
years
piece.
ago.
Yeah, but I wanted to stick with the theme of, because this was like a post 9/11, so I tried to work that theme into it. But I changed the characters.
That's probably for the best.
Yes. So the film starts with, it's all told through, I guess you could say, flashback. Have you seen Annihilation?
Not yet.
Okay. So this doesn't ruin anything, but the film is told from the character sort of recalling the events to someone who's interviewing her. So I was going to do that to try and harken back to the original, that idea of the character telling their first-person perspective.
Yeah.
So in this case, he's being interviewed by a documentary crew talking about this thing that happened, and they're trying to
almost like World War Z or Z if you're Canadian.
Yeah, there you go. So in this case, he's talking about what happened, and we can see that he's shaken. Like whatever happened is still bothering him. Anyway, in my version, Ray was a pastor of a church. And him and his wife separated after the death of their son.
Ooh.
And now they have a daughter they have shared custody over a daughter, and Ray works as a prison chaplain.
I like how you just straight up killed Robbie off. Like you said you were going to do it, so you were just like, fuck him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You serve no purpose. Bye.
But the film opens where he's actually working as a prison chaplain. And he's doing his job, and somewhere in here I wanted to work in, like, on TV in the background you see like footage of the war in Iraq happening. You see footage of the American insurgency in Iraq and American soldiers showing up in Iraq. Anyway, this is the weekend. He's going to have his daughter this weekend. So, and in my version we see that he actually cares about his daughter and actually wants to be a good dad. So he goes home, she's there, and as that evening, he gets a call from a friend of his, and his friend's an astronomer, and his friend's like, hey, there's going to be this weird, like, there's going to be like a meteor shower tonight. Do you want to come and check it out? And so he brings Rachel over, and they're visiting with this astronomer. They're looking at this meteor shower, and his friend's commenting on how bizarre this is. It's like, oh, this is kind of weird. But Rachel gets to look at it, and there's a chance where they get to bond over it. Anyway, next morning, Ray's up early in the morning. Rachel's still asleep. And, before, when he'd left the prison, he was supposed to get a check for his work. And they weren't able to get it to him, and he needed the money.
Yeah.
Anyway, he gets a call this morning saying, like, oh, hey, I have your check, but I'm leaving very shortly. Like, if you can get over here right now, I can give it to you. And we see Ray's sort of hesitant about leaving his daughter alone in the house.
Yeah.
And then this guy, it's the manager or whatever of the prison, says, like, don't, like, relax. Like, you'll just drive across town and be back. She'll be fine. It'll be okay. Nothing's going to happen. So
dun, dun,
Ray
dun.
Exactly. Ray gets in his car, drives across town, goes and even when he gets to the prison, he finds that his check has been left at the front desk anyway. So the person who's supposed to give it to him, we get the sense that he's a little bit paranoid about, like, having things left around, and he's also very protective of his daughter. Anyway, He gets the check, and he's driving back, and as he's driving back, his car stops. And he finds that all the other vehicles around him have suddenly stopped. And all the electricity has died.
Yeah.
He gets out of his car, he's walking along, and then he hears panic in the distance. And we have a scene where it's basically eventually, like, he sees this tripod, he sees this thing, and then he has to run for his life. But he manages to escape, and he goes and he races back to the house, but when he gets back to the house, he finds that the house is being destroyed. And Rachel isn't there.
Oh, damn.
So one of his neighbors is there, like, going through the rubble of her home, and he's like, "Have you seen Rachel? Like, what happened to Rachel?" and she tells him like, oh, she went off. There were some people who left, and she went with them. And then he asks her like, why are you still here? And she's trying to find. She's convinced that her husband's buried beneath the rubble, and she's trying to dig him out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Ray is now basically trying to find his daughter, and he's basically he's picked up by a patrol car, by a military patrol car, and they bring him to the refugee camp. They're relocating everybody to these protected areas.
Yeah,
and he says like, well, your daughter might be in one of these areas. So he takes Ray and he gets to this area. And when he gets to this area, he finds his friend, the astronomer, who he had seen a few nights before. And his friend, the astronomer, says like, okay, so the night after you and Rachel came and visited, I actually went to the site of the crash. And he describes what he saw. He's like, I saw this. And in my version, it's not lightning. They're not buried in the ground.
Yeah, that was kind of
although
weird.
I thought conceptually there was something to that. The idea that like,
they were
what
already
it implies, it not only that, but it implies that we then existed so that they could then come back and harvest us.
Oh,
see, that's where my mind went with it.
Why would you not do something with that? Not you. I just mean in general.
Well, see, exactly. So I felt like that is an interesting concept. But the question that I have is like, how could we have not found one?
Yeah.
Like, unless they were buried really deep.
Yeah.
In
How
the ground.
deep is deep?
I just went like, how could we possibly not have found one? I feel like that's a whole other movie.
I also thought, if we're on this topic, the whole idea that they could like travel through the lightning. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, it's cool if they have the technology, but then, like, if you have the technology, and then, like, if you have the technology to travel through light, why the fuck are you still using a physical body?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing where it's like, I felt it was a little too convoluted. So in my version, I just went back to the original where it's just like capsules. Yeah. They show up in these capsules, basically. Anyway, so his friend is Ogilvy, which is actually the name of it. There is a character like that in the book who is a scientist who's a friend of the main character.
Don't they use the name Ogilvy for the
guy in the basement? Yeah. They do take that name. Anyway,
a bit of a downstep there for that name.
Yeah, exactly. But he finds his friend and he explains like they have a conversation about this, and his friend's like, and then they start talking about theology, and he's like, so do you still believe in God? Like, if these things are from outer space, like, do you still believe in this? Like, even after everything that's happened to you, and now is this really something you still believe in? Anyway, and then at this camp, at that moment, he finds Rachel. It's like, I don't have to answer your question. There's my daughter. He's reconnected with his daughter, and as they stay here for a short time, and even we start to see the fabric of society, so to speak, starting to break down. There's not enough food for everybody.
Okay.
There's actually one conversation that's overheard. He hears someone who's from a middle class background saying, "This sort of thing isn't supposed to happen to us. This is something that happens to other places. This isn't something that's supposed to happen to me." And anyway, so through this we start to see that there's not enough food and people are getting disgruntled. But they've installed generators because the power in the city seems to be not working. But they've been able to get power to this site. Anyway, that night they're sleeping, and the power goes off. And Ray has a moment where he's like, oh, and he hears one of the soldiers going, there should be power. Like, we had the generator on, but all the generators are suddenly not working. There's no electricity at all. Yeah. And Ray goes, okay, wait, the last time this happened, I was in my van, I was driving, and his friend the scientist says, like, actually, I think he's speculating that they have an EMP device that occasionally they're able to trigger, and it just kills all the electricity and so he's like, if they're able to do that, that means they're close. So they basically, he takes Rachel and they escape just before the tripods attack them. However, in the process, his friend, the scientist, is killed. Aww. So now it's Ray and Rachel. It's just Ray and Rachel. And they're like, where are we going to go? Well, let's go and find your mom. Let's go to find your mom, because she's probably gone somewhere, like, she's probably gone somewhere safe. And they're like, oh, well, that would be your grandparents' house, or her mom's place, which is in the countryside. And it just, I feel like it would make more sense for them to just they're like, let's get away from people. They seem to be going after large populations. We'll go somewhere where it's a little more isolated. And they have a farm, so maybe we can actually survive there for a period of time. So they start making their way into the countryside. As they're walking along, Ray finds a van, and he manages to get it starting. And his daughter calls him out and is like, hey, but wait, this isn't our van. This is somebody else's van. And and then they get into a discussion where he basically tries to justify stealing. Yeah. And she's like, but you're still stealing. And he's like, yeah, but we have to get over there to survive. And she's like, yeah, but
they might need that van stealing to stay here and survive.
Exactly. But anyway, they get in the van, they drive along, and then I wanted to keep the scene where they get stopped and he has to get his daughter out of the van. And
that's a good scene.
I thought it was a great scene. But in mine, he doesn't have a gun, but someone pulls a gun on him. And he's like, okay, just like, let me out, let me get my daughter. And then as they're walking away, they just hear it go, it just goes
bananas, BANANES.
And they go into an abandoned cafe, and this is where they meet Mo. And Mo is Mo, short for Muhammad. He's a young man from the city. He was studying at a university, and he's been trying to get back to where his family lives. And he just went into this cafe, and he's been raiding it to try and find food. And he's found a little bit of food, but him and Ray and Rachel, they're going in the same direction, and so they decide to stay together. They're like, maybe it's safer if we travel with a group of us. We also see Mo's got a bit of a limp, and he said that he'd injured himself. But it's going to heal, and he'll be okay. But they're walking along. They find their way to an abandoned farm, and there's a sheep. They find a sheep, and by this point they haven't had a lot to eat. They're all very hungry. And I had this idea for a scene where they're like, okay, well, we need to eat something. Well, here's this sheep, this perfectly healthy sheep. We could kill it and eat it. And Mo says, well, I'm Muslim. We can eat it, but I have to make sure that it's halal. Yeah. That it's actually killed. So I had this idea for a scene where Ray helps Mo kill the sheep and perform whatever needs to be done in order to ensure that that
even though he's like a Christian theological.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before they do this, Rachel is also not sure that she's like, you're going to kill this sheep. And Ray basically says like, okay, just don't watch, like go stay. But she accepts like, okay, like we got to eat. But nobody is really comfortable with it. Anyway,
with what's going on. Yeah.
But they kill the sheep. And as they're eating it, Rachel has this thought. She's like, what if the aliens, what if they're doing the same thing to us?
Yeah.
What if they are actually using us for food? And then they have a whole discussion of like, well, wait, is it okay? Like, where do you draw the line? Like, what is it okay to kill for food, and what is it not okay? When is it okay to kill to stay alive?
You're talking about like the basic tenets of speciesism in terms of vegetarianism.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, while they're like covered in blood and eating this sheep.
Yeah.
But yeah, because my idea for that scene is it's played to some degree for comedic effect.
Yeah. Or at least absurdity.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, they continue to travel along. We see that Ray is also very protective of Rachel. So like if she goes off anywhere, he starts freaking out.
Yeah.
Anyway, at a certain point, they're walking along and the aliens attack, and they all have to hide out in the basement. And it's sort of like the scene in the movie, but it's the three of them, and there's no guy that's already there.
Yeah.
And so it's the three of them in the basement, and they actually end up having to hide out here for a while because the tripods end up basically camping. There's always tripods going through, and so they're
Yeah,
like,
I think in the movie the implication is that they're there for a long time because the way the weeds grow. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the passage of time is hard to tell in this movie. They don't do a good job of conveying that.
So in my version, the idea is like they're gonna like they go in here to hide, and they're constantly looking. And anytime they're ready to leave, they see another tripod, and they're like, okay, well we just can't leave yet. It looks like we're stuck here. We'll have to just keep an eye out for when it's safe for us to go. But during this time, they get to know Mo a little bit more, and Mo points out like, it's interesting, like, you and I are working together right now, but your government, just not that long ago, was trying to convince you that people who look like me were the enemy.
Yeah. Particularly because this is 2005.
Exactly. And he's saying, it just took, now that there's something else that's here, now I'm not the enemy. Now there's something else that's actually here to kill us. And they talk about, and Mo talks about, he asks Ray about like what happened, and Ray says like, well, we lost our son because his son was kidnapped when he was very young, and that's why he's very protective, is because
of Rachel, because of what he went through. Exactly.
And he says that despite the fact that he actually is a prison chaplain, he actually doesn't believe in God. He's just been putting on this facade because that was the one thing. It's this one thing that he could do to actually make somewhat of an income. But he doesn't
people
actually
feel better. But
he doesn't actually believe. But Mo is a very devout, or has been a very devout Muslim, but he's now having a crisis because he's going, I thought that my God would have looked after me, would have saved me, but now there are these monsters, these actual demons, and they're killing everybody.
Yeah.
And so he's now at a crisis of faith. And then they also have a conversation about like our religions were at war hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
Like even just the whole idea of religion is like, it made us enemies, but now because there's something else, because there's another monster that's here, now we work together. But anyway, as they start to spend more time in this house, Mo is he's not only going stir crazy, but his wound has gotten more and more infected, and he's getting very sick.
Yeah.
And he's in a lot of pain. So Ray is going, okay, well, I'm going to have to make a break for it and go and find medicine to try and look after this guy. But he can't leave, because any time he tries to go, there's a tripod.
Also, it would be hard for him to leave Rachel.
Exactly. So, but Mo is becoming more and more restless, and even when he goes to sleep, he wakes up and he's crying, and he's making a lot of noise. And Ray is becoming more and more concerned that Mo is going to attract attention.
The tripods,
from the tripods. So one night, while Mo is sleeping, Ray kills Mo.
Oh shit!
And Rachel sees it.
Oh shit!
And he tries. Now the thing is, the way I thought about staging it. He pretends, the audience knows that Rachel sees it, but he doesn't. Okay. So he pretends that, Mo died. Mo died in his sleep. But Rachel then calls him out and says like, no, he didn't. You killed him. You were scared. You killed him. And you've always ever done things because you were scared.
Yeah.
Anyway, the argument, because they're arguing, that's what attracts the tripod. But they're able to hide, and the tripods take Mo's body. And this is when they see what happens to the people who are captured by the tripods, and they see how they're basically harvested. But anyway, they continue living and they're staying in this house, and eventually they escape. They find an opening, and they're able to make a break for it, but now whatever trust that had been between them is now broken, and Rachel is like just not happy with having to
be with her dad,
with the decisions that her dad has been making.
Yeah.
Anyway, at one point, so they keep going, and Ray finds a van on the side of the road. There's a body in the van, and he pulls the van out, and he's getting the van started, and she's like, okay, whatever, like she goes along with it. And they drive, and this is how they end up getting to where Marianne would be. But when they get to Marianne, they find there's nothing there. And this is when they have their final argument. And he's like, okay, well, we have to keep on moving. And she goes, no, I don't. I'm not going with you. Like, you've done some horrible things, and me, because I haven't stopped you, I feel complicit. I feel like I am also responsible for your actions. So
I'm getting the idea that Rachel is a little bit older in this version.
Yeah, he is a little bit older. Yeah. And Rachel's probably like 15, 16.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like I said, Rachel's a little bit older, but Ray too makes sense too. Yeah. Just the way that you're like the lines and ideas that she's having make me think that she's got to be older than 10 or 11.
Exactly. Anyway, he basically, they have an argument, and he thinks they've resolved it, and they both go to sleep, but when he wakes up, she's gone.
Ooh.
And so she's just left him. And so basically the rest of the movie sort of unfolds like he's wandering, and he's just trying to survive. And eventually, at the very end of the movie, and I just stole this right out of the book, he ends up in this town, and he hears the drone of the Martian.
Yeah.
And he's just at wit's end, and he basically picks a fight with it, and he's like, all right, like, come at me. Like, I'll take you down. And it's played like he's basically lost the plot.
Yeah.
But he's going to go and he's going to take on this tripod. But in doing so, he finds the tripod just collapses. And then he finds that one of the aliens, that like in the movie, the thing opens up and the alien falls out and it dies. And then it cuts back to him. He's being interviewed by the documentary crew. And then he's explaining, like, I later heard that found out it was a bacteria that killed these things. And then they ask him, like, what happened with your daughter? And then it goes back to him. He's basically, like, he's sick and he's being carried in a stretcher. And he makes his way to, like, a makeshift hospital. And while he's in the makeshift hospital, his daughter does show up at the hospital. Oh, and that's how the movie ends.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that you did a lot around, like, morality plays, and particularly I like your juxtaposition around religion.
Thank you.
Talking about not just what it means to be Muslim or Christian, but also how those two religions, like, interact with each other in Western culture, historically and more presently, or at least present for 2005, and like around that rhetoric. But I do think that, like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. My only complaint would be that you planted the seed of having the idea of the Martian ships already there, as if we were going to be harvested, and it's just like, because to me it makes more sense. Like, what if the Martians were basically harvesting us? Mm-hmm. Like, this isn't even the first time that they've done this. Like, what if, like, you know what I mean? Like, they buried the ships, come back, harvested us, made the weed, then harvested the weed, and then, like, left. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Well, because so I thought about that. The only reason I couldn't figure out a way to make it work is because I felt that suddenly the idea of them dying from bacteria became problematic. Because then I was like, well, if they've been here already, they would have figured that out.
Yeah. Well, that's why it doesn't work. That's why I'm when I did my pitch, I'm really glad that I didn't read the book or a plot synopsis. I literally was just like, I'm going to pitch this movie based on what I think and what we got. Mm-hmm. So,
but I'm gonna take that idea and I might use it for something else because
it's pretty good.
Yeah, well, because it ties in directly to that existential question of, like, because now you're like, oh, you now have some sort of thing you can point to say, like, oh wait, this is why humans exist.
Yeah, or even just, like, the parallel between, like, we raise this livestock just to kill it. And it's like, well, yeah, but, we can do that. And then it's like, well, the aliens literally just did that to us. Well, that's wrong. Yeah. Okay, why is it wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, brilliant.
Anyway.
Excellent.
Sorry, I realized that was a really long-winded pitch.
No, that's okay. I was involved the entire way. Like it wasn't like... I've done the same thing where sometimes you're like, I think I need to go into, like, every scene in order to get to this point across. And I think you did, because you do a lot around moral, like I said, morality plays. You do a lot around religion. And I think going into detail, not necessarily line for line, but going into detail about what those morality plays are about, what those quandaries, what those religious dialogue is about, is important, because that's where the theme of your movie is. It's in those little moments, which is what I think this should be. We were talking about The Walking Dead. Really, I think this movie works is because the backdrop of the invasion should be the setting. It should be the setting for the character interaction.
Yeah. Exactly.
The movie isn't really, and same with The Walking Dead, the movie isn't about zombies. It just happens to be because of zombies or because of the invasion. It's not about the invasion. It's about people. Yeah.
And the other thing, where it came from, too, in the book, the character that he ends up stuck in the basement with is actually a member of the clergy.
And I was wondering where that came from.
In my memory, they have discussions of a similar nature. And I felt like that was something that was... I remember when I was watching the movie, when it got to that scene, I went, oh, what? This is missing. This is such a... I feel like this is such an important thing to... You would ask that question. Anybody would ask that question, like, well, what does this mean about, or at least, I don't know, I would be, what does this mean about my place in the universe? And now that I know that there's these bigger aliens out there that can come here
and a lot of religions have, not all of them, and not every sect and not every person, but a lot of religions and fundamentalists have said, no, there is no aliens.
Right.
So even not from a, where's my place in the universe, but from a, I don't want to say, like, Terrocentric point of view, like, because we don't see ourselves as the center of the universe anymore, or the galaxy, in terms of our place physically, geographically, but in terms of like a anthropocentric point of view, or like as humans being the ultimate creation of whatever being, be that God or whatever you want to call it. All of a sudden is like, well, if there are aliens and they clearly are superior to us and are harvesting us, then how can we be made in God's image? Exactly. That's good questions, my dude. Those are good questions.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
Cool, thank you.
There's a lot to think about. Yeah. And
that's my pitch.
Yeah, it was excellent.
Thank you.
I took mine from a very different perspective. I took mine from the... I wanted to do more with the cosmic horror. Like these sort of unstoppable things that we can't even touch. And so mine almost isn't a War of the Worlds movie.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued.
Just because, and I just wrote it the way, so I'll just get into it. So Ray is left with his two children the same way, except they don't suck. I would almost even cut half of that out. Nobody sucks, because I don't really want to deal with their characters right now, because I don't care. So when the lightning strikes, everyone gathers around the spot where the earthquake hits, but then this like fog rolls in and the sky is covered with clouds, and we hear the horn blast, because I really like that sound, but we never see anything. And all of a sudden, beams of light start shooting. I just hit my microphone because I got excited.
Yeah.
Beams of light start shooting out of the sky, but we can't really tell where they're from. Like, they're all gathering from one direction, but they just... And so, like, they're all dodging these beams of light, and when they hit people, the people just are like poof. Like, not even dust, just, like, gone. Like, their body glows bright, and then they're just gone. And Ray manages to dodge this beam as it's like coming towards him, like, boo, shooting down from the sky, and he narrowly dodges it, but he sees the person that was in front of him, because it's coming from his behind. He sees the person that was in front of him get hit, and they light up, and all of a sudden they're just gone. Just nothing. And he's like, "Wow!" So Ray then takes the kids to their mother's place, the same way that happens in the movie, and they sleep in the basement. But then, like, when the lights start to go crazy, there's the lightning returns, and all of a sudden we see the same kind of effect. This fog rolls in, and they hide in the basement. And the whole house is like on fire, and it's filled with lights, and we see them close the door. In the morning, Ray opens the door, and we see that the neighborhood is just demolished. There's no plane crash. The neighborhood is just demolished. And, like, everything is just fucked. I even wrote that. Fucked, underlined. So Ray meets a journalist who is... she says, were you a part of this? And he's like, no. And he's like, oh, like, do you mind if I interview you? And so she interviews him a little bit, and it's like, we don't really know what happened. We just made our way out here. And she's like, oh, you're lucky. Like, most of New York is gone now. Like, just... And I was interviewing a scientist talking about the lights that happened in the Ukraine earlier, because that happened like a day or so earlier. And the beams of light, we don't know what makes them. We don't even know what they're made of. But we do know that when they hit a person, they're just unmade. And that's the phrase. That's the phrase they use. It's not like they're destroyed. They're not disintegrated. It's not a heat beam. They're not converted into any kind of other matter. They're not even transported somewhere else. They're just unmade. Anything the beam of light touches is unmade. It just becomes not.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So first you were, and then you aren't.
Right. And it's not like your energy doesn't transfer. It's not like energy transfers from one form to another. It's just gone.
Yeah, no, you're just not. Like
the matter is just...
Yeah, it's just... You're just gone.
Wow.
Like I said, at first you weren't, and then you aren't. Or at first you were, and then you aren't.
Wow.
Yeah. So then Ray drives the children. He's like, well, I'm not going to tell them any of this. We're just going to... They don't need to hear this. So he drives with the children off in the van, and we have that whole scene with the van where the guy kicks them out. And he's just like, I want to get my daughter, and he pulls his daughter out. And then another guy picks up the gun that Ray has, but instead of shooting others to get the van, he basically is like I don't want to live, or I don't want to be in a world where nobody knows that I existed. I don't want to be unmade. And so he just puts the gun to his own head and pulls the trigger and blows his brains out, like beside the van. Like, doesn't even want the van, just blows his own brains out beside the van. Like, I just don't want to live in a world where yeah. So, and we don't have to necessarily show that. We can do that off screen.
Right.
I just think like him showing, like putting the gun to his, and then like panning into the restaurant, and you hear bam, and then it looking outside, and we see just like brains on the man, and we get the reaction of Ray, Rachel, and Robbie. So yeah. So then they get on the ferry, and that whole thing happens. I don't really think we need to introduce Cheryl and her daughter, but it works kind of, because then it's just like one more person that we can. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the whole ferry thing happens because I think that works really, really well. But we don't see any of the in the background. We don't see any of the tripods. It's just all of a sudden this fog comes rolling down the hill, and there's like lightning, and some lights start shooting out from the fog, and it's like, oh shit, we all know what that is. And so they're like, move the ferry, and then that whole thing plays out the same way. After they get across the ferry, they're on this hill.
But does the tripod come up from beneath?
No.
Okay, so they actually get across in this.
Yeah, so they do get across, okay. And on we never see anything. We only see these lights come out of the fog.
Got it.
So then they make it across, and they make it to this farm, and they're walking, like everyone from the ferry is sort of walking up this hill, and passing them is a bunch of like military vehicles, and we see Robbie. He's like wants to go over the. So we see them go over the hill, and there's clearly artillery firing, but we don't see what they're firing at. Right, we just hear it going off in the background, and Robbie's like, I want to go over the hill, and all of a sudden we hear like screams and panic, and the fog starts rolling in, and there's those blue beams coming out again. But we are only hearing this, and we don't see anything from over the hill. Like, it's just over the cusp of a hill, and Robbie's like, I want to go see. If we see what it is, if they're firing, they must be firing at something. And Ray stops him and says, you can't go. And we have that whole scene where Rachel is being left behind, and she's like, I want to go. And people are like, well, you can't stay here. And Ray is like holding Robbie. He's like, you can't go. And Robbie's like, if we can see it, we can go. And Ray looks back and sees Rachel, and he just goes, okay. And he just like lets go. And he's like, if you want to see it, you can see it, but I'm going back with Rachel. And he chooses to go back with Rachel, who's waiting for him. And Robbie goes over the hill. And we never see him again. He just goes over the hill.
Right.
But I want it to be more like he like is holding. He's like, we have to go. And he's like, no, I can see them. And he like lets go of Robbie's, and they're not lying on the ground. He just lets go of Robbie's jacket and walks back to Rachel, and then Rachel and Ray picks Rachel up because she's young. I want her to be maybe a little bit younger than she is. He picks Rachel up, and then the two of them, they literally watch as Robbie just runs over the hill. And she's like, where's Robbie going?
And for him, is he going because he just wants to see it?
He wants to go over the hill and see what it is. Like,
Right.
there must be firing at
Right.
something. So he goes over the hill, and we see him
Right.
go over the hill. We actually watch like Rachel or Ray is holding Rachel in like a classic, I don't know what kind of carry you'd call that, like a child's carry, where you have like the bum on your arm and you sort of have them straddle your hip.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have them straddle. And so he's holding her like that, and they're both looking out, and they watch Robbie run over the cusp of this hill and disappear from sight. I have very specific ways that I want things shot for this movie. It's unusual. Normally I'm conceptual, but this time I had very visual ways that I wanted things shot.
Okay, interesting.
So then they wind up going into this house, into the farmhouse, and the same way, and they meet that weird guy. I can't remember what you said his name was. Ogilvy?
What is it? Ogilvy?
Ogilvy? Whatever.
But he
it's not
was
the same
his
guy.
friend earlier. Different guy. Yeah,
different
yeah.
guy.
But that guy in this movie.
Yeah, now I'm talking about the guy in the farmhouse, the weird guy in the farmhouse. So they wind up being
Tim Robbins' character.
Yeah. They wind up being in the weird guy in the meeting with the weird guy in the farmhouse, except there's no alien periscope. So they're hiding inside, and they keep hearing noises. They keep hearing these noises from above because they're in the basement. And they keep hearing these noises from above, but every time they like sort of try and peek out, they never see any of the blue lights. And they're in there for like weeks. It's been, and the dude is slowly starting to go. Not Ray, but the other dude is slowly starting to go insane with cabin fever, and Ray is starting to really worry about like his safety and Rachel's safety, because this guy is just getting so crazy. So in order to keep them safe, like, it gets to the point where Ray is like, I can't do this anymore, and so he does the same scene where he puts the blindfold over Rachel and says, no matter what, don't look. And he closes the door, and he goes about killing this guy. But the blindfold falls off, and Rachel sees her dad walk out with all, like, just covered in blood and the dead body of this guy. And she's so scared that she just, without even realizing it, she just runs out of the house. Wow. She's just so traumatized. Because at this point she's quite young, and we've had all this stuff happen to her. And so she finally just sees her dad do this and runs out of the house. She just runs out screaming. And Ray is like, oh my God, I have to go after her, even if there's lights outside, or even if those things are outside. And he runs out and chases after her, and he finds her. And it turns out the thing that was actually making noise that they were hearing was actually another family that had moved into the farmhouse above them that was also hiding. And the people that were in the farmhouse above didn't go into the basement because they thought there was something below. There was
somebody else in the base, like aliens in the basement.
Yeah, and so neither of them they were always too afraid to like explore or leave the house. But anyway, so Ray runs after and he catches up with Rachel, and she doesn't seem to be like reacting, but she's like, he's calming her down, and then all the screaming actually does attract the lights, and we see the other family is running out of the house, this new family that they didn't know was there, and so Ray is facing Rachel, and over top of Ray's shoulder, Rachel sees the lights hit this family, and they just get unmade, the whole family.
Wow. Right?
Like all 6 of them or whatever. Maybe 4. Whatever. Just sees them all get unmade. And then so all of a sudden Rachel just can't anymore. So she's maybe a little younger, maybe like 8. And so we see then Ray is making his way to Boston, and he's basically like carrying Rachel at this point. Like, she barely walks. She's just dead to the world. All she does is like stare. She doesn't show any emotion. And just watching her dad and then watching more people die, because the entire time in the original movie, Ray is constantly like, look at me, don't look at anything else, look at me, like constantly trying to protect her. And so I finally wanted to just have her, she just snaps, so he can't protect her anymore. So more lights show up when they finally get to Boston. They're going to Boston to find like Rachel's mom. Still the same story. When the lights finally or the lights show up when they get into Boston, and they hide in the tunnel. And normally Rachel is claustrophobic. I wanted to establish that, and the way that like Ray has been calming her down is with the arm thing that Robbie showed him. But like, he actually knows how to do it, and he tries to do it, but she's not even screaming. She's not even screaming, and Ray has to pick her up to get her into this tunnel for safety. And finally they walk through the tunnel, and they make it to Marianne, or Ray's ex-wife's parents, their parents' place. And the house is intact, but there is no one there. Like, it's just empty. And so Ray, who is like half talking to himself but half also trying to engage Rachel by talking, says, oh, don't worry, there's no way of knowing whether they were unmade or whether they just left to go find somewhere safe. So this is both a good and a bad thing, because we don't know. Which Ray sort of is like, oh shit, like we don't know. Were they unmade or were they just left? We'll never know. And so he's like, I can't deal with this right now. And he puts Rachel to sleep. And we can see that he is exhausted because he's basically been carrying Rachel since the farmhouse, or like dragging her, not dragging literally, but like trying to get her to move. And so he puts her to bed and he's like, okay, good night. And she doesn't seem to respond, but she doesn't even really appear to close her eyes. She's just sort of whatever. As Ray collapses on the floor near her bed in her room, he's like too exhausted to even move anymore. We hear some screaming and some lights from like flashing from outside as a fog rolls in. So they make their way outside onto the street and they try to run away, but Rachel just stops walking. She can't even walk. And Ray tries to pick her up, but he's just like so tired he can only make a couple steps. Like he's just so exhausted. And he pleads with her to keep moving, but she doesn't seem to hear him. She's just staring off. And the beams are getting closer, and Ray tries to pick her up again, but he's just so exhausted. And he puts her down. He can't carry her with her anymore, and he's pleading and crying and telling her, you need to move. You need to move with me. And she just doesn't respond. She's just staring, shocked. And Ray gets up and he starts walking. And he's telling Rachel, like, you have to follow me, but she doesn't move. And so, like, this is all shot from, like, him turning around, like, he's coming towards the camera, and he's turning around, like, come on, and he's, like, keep stumble walking towards the camera, and we just, like, watch as he slowly walks away, screaming at Rachel to move, and she just stands still until he's too far away that the fog, like, closes in around her.
Oh.
And then he's just sort of shambling his way through the fog, like sort of like just crying and like sort of he can't believe that he just left her, but also he couldn't move her anymore. And so he's both lost physically in the fog, but also emotionally. And then we see the fog around him begin to clear. And right in front of Ray are 3 legs of a tripod. And he looks up, but we only see the legs. We only see these 3 legs on the ground, and he looks up, and we're looking at his face, like the camera's on his face as he like tracks his way up whatever these things legs are, and then we see his eyes, and like his face is filled with horror and wonder, and we see his eyes are like reflecting weird lights and shit, like lots of crazy stuff, and then his eyes start to fill with a blue light, and then the beam hits him and the screen goes black.
Whoa.
Yeah, I really wanted to lean into this like cosmic horror, because I think that horror is like, this is a horror movie I would watch because it's not scary because of like gore or viscera or even scary because of like death. It's scary because all the things that happen are people, and all the things that make you do scary things are like, I don't know, it's almost like emotionally scary. Like the fact that Ray is driven to the point where he can't even carry his own daughter.
Right.
And he just can't even carry her. Like he's like, and screaming at her to move, but he barely can move himself. And that's like, finally, I don't know. I thought that was scarier. Like, what if you were in a position where like you had to choose between your children, so Sophie's choice. What if you had to choose between your children? And it's not like Ray doesn't loves Robbie or Rachel more. It's more like Robbie wanted to go over the hill, and they watch him go over the hill, and he never comes back. And we don't even know if he got unmade. He just doesn't come back. And and the same thing happens with like when they reach Boston, and they just are like, well, we'll never know if your mom was unmade. Maybe she just left. We can't know.
Right.
And so the terror comes from like not knowing. Like, even he doesn't know what happens to Rachel. He just leaves her, and that's almost more heartbreaking. He chose to leave her.
Wow.
I don't know.
I there is something that's sort of Lovecraftian in that it's the mystery of like, what is it that's out there, and also this idea of like suddenly just not being. Yeah, you just and having to wrestle with that, like being unmade. Like, what is that?
There's a specific scene that I wanted to play too, where they're all in the basement after the lights show up. When they're all in the basement of their mother's house, and I wanted to. That scene in particular, I thought was really, really good, and I wanted to play in it where they close the door and Rachel goes, "Are we still alive?"
Right.
And I almost wanted to change the line so it was more like, "Are we still here?"
Right.
So they close the door and everything's black, and it's just, "Are we still here?" And to me, that was the crux of the story. Like, I definitely went like very like cosmic nihilistic horror with this, and like that's why I said mine's not even a War of the Worlds. I just really like the sound design where like you hear a monster or a thing and you see the lights, but it isn't until the very end where you see the three legs of the tripod, and you don't even see what's at the top. You just see the three legs in front of Ray. And then he like his gaze tracks up and he like sees whatever it is. And so that's why I was like, I don't know if you'd call this a War of the Worlds. I think if you watched this movie and you knew War of the Worlds, you might be like, oh shit, it's a tripod.
Yeah.
Because it's only three legs, but I don't think that really would make it. You could do this movie without War of the Worlds.
Right, yeah. Well, because one thing that is interesting with War of the Worlds, if you look at it historically, and sort of the genre of the alien invasion story, when War of the Worlds was first published, at the time, and even well into the late 20th century, alien films generally were invaders are bad, they have come to destroy us. And that was sort of, I guess, what War of the Worlds, that was sort of the precedent with War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
That doesn't really start to change, I think, until, the earliest one I can think of where that's a little different is 2001, where it's not even like there's alien invaders, there's some alien force, but its intention is really a mystery. And it's more like, what is the intention of this thing? And then you have Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where they're peaceful. They're peaceful aliens that have just traveled to Earth. Same with E.T.
Arrival.
Another film. Yeah, Arrival. District 9 actually was a really interesting one that put a spin on it. Avatar, it was funny because Avatar came out around the same time, but I personally think District 9 was a much smarter movie.
That's because Avatar is literally just Pocahontas.
But District 9 played with apartheid. Like it played, it took those themes, like that theme of racism,
it's specifically,
and set it in South Africa as well.
Yeah, it's specifically set in South Africa to talk about that. And I think that's why like that movie works because it plays into that. Whereas I think this War of the Worlds doesn't necessarily work because it tries to play into the 9/11 thing by setting it in New York specifically. But I think I think District 9 does a better job. Yeah, but I think. What's interesting, though, with H.G. Wells, what has been speculated with the original novels, that it was about colonialism. And it's actually hinted at in the movie. There's a line where Marianne says to Robbie, like, oh, you have to write your paper on the French Belgian
occupation
of Algeria.
And I went like, oh, okay, that's an interesting tie-in, because in it's been speculated that the original novel is about colonialism, or that's thematically what it's related to. Because
you definitely could do something with that. It would be a better story than Tarzan.
Exactly, and so I tried to do that also with my version as well, with the whole idea of the Iraq War is also like an American occupation of Iraq.
Yeah,
and so drawing that parallel as well. So in terms of thematically, like with what the original book is dealing with. But yeah, what was interesting with your pitch was I liked that there was something that was disembodied about it. No pun intended. But like the aliens or the tripods you don't see till the end. Even then you don't see the whole thing. But this whole idea of like where I'm going with this is intention. Like in the War of the Worlds that Spielberg did, it's pretty much taken at face value, like, oh, they are here to kill us and eat us.
Yeah.
Whereas what is interesting with more, I guess, the postmodernist spin on the alien invasion is that the question of intention. Because even if you look at like Lovecraftian fiction, a lot of it, even if you look at like the Call of Cthulhu, it's this like demonic presence.
Well, I wouldn't even say demon, because specifically, I mean, I drew a lot on my pitch, or for my pitch, I drew a lot on like this Lovecraftian cosmic horror, where no matter what you throw at them, nothing matters.
Right.
And I even wanted the idea that Ray sees whatever is at the top of the tripod at the end to almost drive him nuts, where he's like scared and awestruck at the same time.
Right.
Where like, and the point is it's not like these creatures are even battling us.
Right.
Like the way that they say it is like, you know, is this a war as much as like man is on maggots? Right? It's not even that these things are battling us. They just are there and we can do nothing about it.
Right.
All we can do is attempt to survive. And the reason Rachel doesn't make it or whatever is because she
survive.
just...
Yeah. All that we can do to help ourselves is stay alive. Sorry. Sorry, that was a real rush. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Rush tangent. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the idea is basically that you just are trying to survive, and then like Robbie, I don't know, everyone just does it in their own way and none of it works. Basically, the end, I mean, like mine's not a happy movie. At the end, nothing matters.
Right.
At the end, Ray leaves Rachel, and that doesn't really matter. He's sad about it. Mm-hmm. But he also left Robbie, and we don't know where anybody is. We don't know who's made or unmade. We don't even know what's at the top of the tripod. It just doesn't matter.
Right.
Nothing matters. It's a little nihilistic. I don't know.
We are
I think
nihilists.
the story is
we
good.
don't believe in anything. Sorry.
I think the story is good. I don't actually know if this is a good pitch. I think it's a good horror movie.
I think you know what I think it would work really well as is like a short story, or like a novella, because there's a lot of very heady concepts in there.
Yeah,
that I think you could actually really flesh out in the written form quite nicely.
And I thought a lot about what it would look like more than I usually do. So, for instance, when I did Brave last week, I very much was thinking about conceptual ideas.
Right.
Whereas, and I often do that, whereas this time I was thinking more about how you could show like that the fog. I mean, literally the fog is a representation of not knowing. You can't see beyond it. Right. And so when we lose Rachel at the end, that scene in particular, the way we lose Rachel and the way that Ray finally sees what's at the top of the tripod, those two for me were like very visual when I was conceiving them. And I think that's because like the fog represents not knowing. And then when we see the fog finally clear and Ray looks at the top, what he sees is that maybe knowing, maybe seeing what was there is actually scarier than not knowing.
Right.
I don't know. Again, I'm not sure it's a good pitch, or I'm not sure it's a... I don't know.
I think conceptually it's interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking of The Mist.
Yeah. I mean, spooky.
But there's something that's similar there in that whole idea of like they're stuck in one place and it's like, what's going on? Well, we don't know. We don't know what's going on up there. We just know it's bad.
Yeah. I also wanted to play with this idea like of the family above and the family below.
That was interesting.
Not in terms
of
not in terms of classism. I just meant like the reason that both of them were like staying where they were was because of the fear. Not because like there was never actually anything out there. It was they were just scaring each other, and I think that's almost more powerful.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah. Man, talk about weird. This is the happiest horror movie I've ever seen. Not either our versions, like the version we got. At the end, when Robbie shows up at the end, I was so angry. But I was like, okay, I get that they're trying to go for an uplifting thing because of the 9/11 allegory and the human spirit and all that, but also, I don't know if that makes for a good horror movie.
Question. Is her, like, new boyfriend / I don't know, partner... Is he alive at the end? I don't know if he's there.
Yeah, if you look, you can sort of see him behind. I think you can see him behind what I'm assuming are the grandparents or Mary.
Because I'm like, wouldn't that be convenient if he was the only one who didn't live? But
yeah, no, I think everyone's alive at the end.
It's implied that everybody lives.
Somebody's got to die, man.
I've got to say, as much as I love, and I do love Spielberg, I do think his endings tend to not be great.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on movie to movie.
But even in the movies that I think are really strong, some of his endings I go like, really? Like that was how you chose to, like, you didn't need that.
You didn't need it.
Like, so an example would be The Post, more recent movie. Okay, well, there's this whole spiel where basically
Spielberg?
like one of it's Spielberg. Oh, that's good. one of the characters, it's a side character. It's not even a central character. Basically, like, goes into this very unmotivated speech about the importance of the freedom of the press. And I was watching this. I remember sitting in the theater and just this coming up on screen and going, how stupid does he think I am that I can't figure out that this is what the movie is about?
So feel like he's.
I felt like I was being talked down to, and that's where I feel like, come on, man, have a little more respect for your audience.
Yeah, like you're just waiting for Stan Marsh to pipe in. Like, I learned something today.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like he is guilty of doing that, even in his good movies.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess it's fine, but I feel like as an audience, I just hate it when I feel like you might not have understood the last hour and a half of what you just sat through. So let me just explain it all to you. And I'm like,
thanks, Captain Planet.
I get it.
You know what I mean? Like at the end when they do the moral justification of like the...
Yeah.
Like, Captain Planet says, never litter and always do drugs. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The only place where I think it's something like that is acceptable is Scooby-Doo. Where it's like,
I actually don't even think...
Oh, this is why
I don't even think they do it.
It's kind of funny and goofy,
like
but...
I don't even think they do it all that much in Scooby-Doo. They really don't.
Yeah.
The only place that I think it really, really works is in South Park because they're trying to make fun of the fact that they're not for children.
Yeah, or Rick and Morty does something, or Rick and Morty does the like, there's a lesson to be learned here, but I'm not going to be the one to figure it out.
But I'm not going to be the one to unpack it, yeah. But I specifically like it in the episodes of South Park as the seasons go on, where Kyle will be like, did we learn anything today? And Stan will just be like, fuck you. Like, just because, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, either the point of the episode was that there was no point, because sometimes they do the anti-lesson, or that the point of the episode was so blatant, like...
Yeah,
like it's
exactly.
just like, you know what? Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
Although Stan usually doesn't say fuck you to Kyle. It's usually like to his dad.
Yeah.
Anyway, any last minute thoughts about War of the Worlds?
No. I think I've said everything there is to say that I would like to have said about it.
Yeah, I got it all.
That's that.
Where can people find you?
At home, because...
Don't go to Nathaniel's house.
But yeah, please don't come and
Stay
find
at home.
me.
Stay at home. Also, don't stalk him.
Yeah, but you can find me on the internet or my avatar. I'm not going to get into this. My online internet account. I can't use words anymore. Letterboxd at Draper Nate and Twitter at Nate Draper. There we go.
You can find my band Robot Philosopher on Facebook, YouTube, and anywhere you buy your awesome music goods or listen. And you can also stick around here on this channel, because every week we've got new episodes of CineMasters, and every 2 weeks we have new episodes of video essays from me, which are super fun, and I think you should stick around for those. You can also finally check out, every 2 weeks I have episodes of Audio Mind coming out. Check in the link in the description so you can find a link for Audio Mind where we talk about music and other things, but that's on a different channel. And
what I was going to say is that is a great title for a show.
Audio Mind?
That is a Audio Mind, yeah.
Yeah, your Audio Mind.
It's a great title. I love it.
Anyway. And we'll catch you back here same time next week with whatever movie that we haven't decided we're watching yet. Peace out.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye.